Hi guys, welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'd like to talk about the Tenshoku card frame, how we got there, and some important tips for any other people who would like to make a game or just develop a frame for fun in the future. With that said, let's get started. When I was starting on this project, I was basically starting out with nothing. I had some experience with Magic Set Editor in the past and some basic card design ideas that were just basically custom Force of Will cards. My tools at that time were simply a free browser-based Photoshop program called Photopea, and while Photopea is fine and great for what it does, it didn't necessarily meet all my needs as time would go on. Not that my skill level was very high anyways. What it did though was provide me with a tool to open Photoshop files and work conceptually on a new card frame. Having come from Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, and Force of Will backgrounds, I had a fair share of experience with various card frames and borders, the pros and cons of each, and I also knew a lot about the resources that were available in the custom card circles, and that would help me at least get started. So rather than start from scratch, what I initially did was download a ton of custom card templates for various games, and at this point my game concept wasn't even complete, so I was flexible enough to just adjust my game to match the layout. One important side note I want to bring up here is that the more you plan ahead of time, the more you can help yourself in making decisions. No creative person wants to limit themselves, but when you're doing everything yourself, some limitations can actually help guide you. Do you want to have card names in the top or the bottom? Do you want to use values like 1 and 2 or 100 and 200 for defense and attack? Will your game use a resource system akin to Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, or will you just use inherent card advantage like in Yu-Gi-Oh? How will your cards be arranged on the table? Will that affect how visible information is shown on the cards? What do you want to highlight? Foolish me at the time hadn't figured a lot of this out yet, but as time would go on, I would eventually get all this worked out. So anyways, I had some custom templates that others had made, and I found something that I liked conceptually. I spent a little time adjusting the frames and working with it to emphasize what I wanted to with regards to the transparency and the shapes. But at the end of the day, I realized I wanted something a bit less Western feeling. I continued to make modifications to see if I could get something I was happy with, but again, it just kinda feels eh. Important note number 2. Don't be afraid to walk away from something if it's just not working out. I suppose this lesson could apply to more than just game design and card frames, but don't feel trapped by something just because you put time into it. The frame was not achieving what I wanted, and so I moved on to the next idea. After many hours, not wasted mind you, as I knew something that I didn't want, so I started out now with at least something I didn't want to do. I considered that the artwork was something that I really wanted to try and emphasize because I wanted it to be beautiful, and it was one of the things I liked about Force of Will, was how it used full art cards. Other games, of course, have used full art in various degrees, but I think Force of Will has done it in one of the most beautiful ways, really showcasing the artwork. I knew by this point that my game was starting to lean more into the Japanese number system regarding using 100s and 1000s rather than 1s and 2s, so I thought about emphasizing the artwork would go along good with that same idea of kind of the Japanese game style. I had also realized that I was researching card printing at this point and that I would not be making multiple versions of cards, as it wasn't really financially viable for someone making their own personal game that they can't sell. So everything was just going to have one version. Important note number 3. Keeping in mind how you're going to be redistributing your project. If you're going to distribute it at all. Are you going to have booster packs? Are you going to have set boxes? Is there going to be randomness involved in acquiring cards? Do you need to have chase cards to sell product if you're trying to raise money? Are you emphasizing collectors? Do you want everyone to have access to everything? All these things are important to consider. As work continued, I used this altered form of a full art Yu-Gi-Oh card I had found. This is, again, another custom. At this point, I was questioning how I might use my resource system if I had continued on with this style. How would I show what attribute a card was? How would I show how much it costs to play? Would there even be enough legible card text space? Someone who's ever played Yu-Gi-Oh can definitely recognize that issue. My answer was to create a fade on text areas to help keep cards legible. In addition, I would consider how the information was laid out on the card and how would it be visible in the hand and on the field. It's around this point in the frame process that I had settled on the majority of my design-based questions regarding the game. I knew I was going to have a resource system, so I needed a place to put costs. I knew that I was going to use the Japanese system of 100s and 1000s for numbers, so I needed to make sure I had enough space to fit those kind of numbers. And I wanted my game to be cross-playable with Force of Will. This led me to use a particular type of text that would work out how rules were explained. In addition, I had also learned from earlier examples that the shading behind text was a good addition. It added some clarity to sometimes difficult to read cards. Important note number 4. Many TCGs have a basic art and a full art or a special variant version of a product. Oftentimes, players read a card in its basic form and then remember it, allowing for the special versions to not need so much text. A perfect example of this is with Magic the Gathering's 10th edition, Time Stop. With the non-foil version, there's lots of rules text and reminder information. With the foil version, there's only the effect. Or, even farther back, the player rewards cards in Magic had no text at all, just a title. However, because Tenshoku wasn't going to have these multiple versions, I wanted a version that was beautiful, but also legible in the same card frame. Always keep in mind how your audience will first view your product. It was at this point when I finally reached out and asked a graphic design friend of mine to help me put all of what I had learned over the last couple months into something specifically ours. That led to the creation of these variants. I had a general needs list from my design at this point, and so I was able to put those pieces together in various forms and eventually decide on what was the most appealing version. This one. It was symmetrical, and it had all the information I wanted, and it looked okay. But it's okay to look at your work, and even after you've come so far, and still want to do more. Around this point, I started talking with some other friends who had helped out in other card games in the past, and I got their input based on what they liked. Obviously, art is subjective, and so there's not one perfect thing. I got cute little doodles like some of these, and I thought a lot about what the underlying message is of what they found attractive about these various frames were. In my case, I think mine was too symmetrical. It needed a little bit of a regularity to it. I even looked up some research papers on the art of symmetry and tried to find information about what humans find aesthetically pleasing. With my newly found appreciation for bits of asymmetrical design, I spoke with my designer friend about implementing these ideas in various ways and seeing what we could come up with. The end result, after going through multiple tries, was still very impressive. We had implemented nearly all the ideas along the way, and honestly, if I'd stopped here, I'd be very proud of what we made. I actually might still use this final version in another game someday. I really like it. So after all this journey of doing things with myself and my friends, I just thought that I needed to reach out to a professional friend of mine who'd worked in the industry before, and I explained the situation, and originally I had only planned to ask him for help with the card backs and maybe the logo of the game. And the more I thought about it and looked over his work, I eventually asked him to produce a card frame for me as well. His initial frame he sent back to me had some great ideas, and some things I wasn't in love with. He had extended the border, and he had added a rainbow touch. and also decided that hexagon cost symbols, something I hadn't even considered. I loved the hexagons, and we worked over the next month or so to develop the frame even further. We expanded on the nameplate to make it larger and more emphasis in the top part of the card. We removed the colored border to leave only the artwork, and in addition we'd make a couple changes to some of the symbols of the resource symbols just to better match the theme. Finally, after having received the frame and adjusting it slightly to address color attribute and other things that I wanted to personally add, I finally had a frame that I was actually 110% happy with. Important lesson number 5. Good things take time, and you have to be willing to be flexible. If I had rushed or if I had said good enough at any point, I don't think I would have gotten to this end goal. I'm incredibly satisfied with how it ended up, and I hope any aspiring designers out there have the luxury of time when they are working on their projects. With that said, here we are at the end of the video. I hope this has been interesting, or at least eye-opening, into the journey of a card frame. If you have any questions, comments, or want to know more about a specific topic, feel free to let me know or leave a comment below. Thanks guys. Take care.